Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Hello, hello, good morning. Good morning. Really, the first Shabbat after Passover is Shabbat Shabagel. So Shabbat Shabagel, everyone.
Shabbat what?
Shabbat Shabagel. Come on, Paul. I want to start by encouraging you, if you haven't yet made a name tag, to go ahead and make one. You might think everybody already knows your name, but it's nice to give them a clue just in case they don't. So you can stick on a name tag. Take a second and just, if you haven't already, said good morning to the folks around you. Say hi, say hi. It's good to be together. It's very good to be together. Okay, we are thanking John for the bagels and Candy for picking up the bagels. Well done, well done. Good teamwork there. Lots of happy faces around the room. All right, join me, if you please, in the blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We are ready. We're still in Leviticus somehow. We're only at chapter 9. Feels like it lasts forever, doesn't it? We're at Parshat Shmini. You have on your handout an outline of this week's Torah portion from the Torah, a Women's Commentary. So, finally, the ritual offerings we've heard so much about are going to begin. We'll see a ritual of purgation for Aaron the priest and his household, a ritual of purgation for the people, and then the appearance and presence of God. Then we have this very difficult interlude, the strange fire of Nadav and Avihu. Then we switch, quick change, into the laws of Aaron the priest and his household, and then a slew of rules around kosher eating. So we'll get to see some of that. Let's start, though, with chapter 9, where the Torah portion begins. Chapter 9, verse 1 here, Shmini. And we'll see what happens on the 8th day. On the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said to Aaron, "Take a calf of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering without blemish, and bring them before God. And speak to the Israelites, saying, Take a he-goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, yearlings without blemish for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before Adonai, and a meal offering with oil mixed in. For today Adonai will appear to you." So they're on a mission. They have to do this because this is when it gets real. The thing they've been working towards and preparing for and building and putting together and setting up, it's finally happening. And the entire purpose, as we've known all along, is for God to be with them. God's presence will appear to them. Verse 5, they brought to the front of the tent of meeting the things Moses had commanded, and the community leadership came forward and stood before God. Moses said, "This is what God has commanded you to do, that the presence of God may appear to you." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Come forward to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering, making expiation for yourself and for the people, and sacrifice the people's offering and make expiation for them as God has commanded." Aaron came forward to the altar and slaughtered his calf of sin offering. Aaron's sons brought the blood to him. He dipped the finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar, and he poured out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. the fat, the kidneys, and the protuberance of the liver from the sin offering he turned into smoke on the altar as God had commanded Moses. And the flesh and the skin were consumed in fire outside the camp. Then he slaughtered the burnt offering. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, and he dashed it against all sides of the altar. They passed the burnt offering to him in sections as well as the head, and he turned it into smoke on the altar. He washed the entrails and the legs and turned them into smoke on the altar with the burnt offering. Okay, a charming way to start the day, isn't it? Anytime we get to say protuberance at 9 a.m., we're really excited. So, maybe it's the textile lover in me, but I cannot imagine going through all of the work of creating this mishkan and this altar and then immediately dashing blood everywhere. It's so gross. And you think about all of the people that it took to build this thing, and this is what it's for. It's not that they're doing anything wrong, but just that it's so gory right away. So it's starting, and it starts first in a way that makes sense. Aaron has to be purified. He has to be eligible. He has to make this expiation offering before he can bring his sons in and before they can represent the people. It's kind of a domino effect, Paul.
These were very frequent sacrifices, weren't they?
Yes, but these are the first ones.
Okay, but it's not as if they had a shout in those days. So these were very artisanally created fabrics to adorn the altar.
And the priests.
And the priests.
Remember, they're in their fancy dresses too.
They needed to constantly be remade.
Not remade. So there's a difference between pure and kosher and clean. That's not the same thing. So our kind of modern food safety laws are difficult to put down because we know what's safe and what's not, and what's kind of gross and what's not. But I think in terms of this practice, they must have had ways that they were washing things, because we talk about, there's a lot of laundry law, especially in Leviticus, where we're talking about if a dead animal that you're not allowed to eat dies on a piece of clothing that you would wear. Actually, that's in part of this Torah portion in chapter 11. You have to kind of purify it. It has to be washed a certain way. So there's a recognition that the textiles are going to get used and they're going to be dirty, but there's also a way to clean them. And I think it's just different than how we clean in the modern day. Yeah, Neda.
But weren't they in the desert?
Weren't they in the desert? Well, Miriam had her miraculous well. Perhaps they used that. I think they had ways. Obviously, they had to have drinking water available to that. They had to find water to drink because they lived through the desert. There are desert dwellers that find ways to do this. So, it wouldn't. We have to kind of suspend our modern, I think, use of water and think about, there's a lot of good imagination when we think about this. But yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we are building what is a very, artisanal is a good word for it, this very carefully constructed, beautiful thing. And not only are they setting it up here, they're going to move it from place to place. They're going to be doing this. The book of Numbers, we go to all these different stations on our journey. So they find ways to do this. I don't know enough about the kind of aquatic history of the area to speak direct. No, but I'm sure there are scholars who do, who could speak more directly to exactly where they would have found water. But we know, by the way, wells are such an important part of biblical narrative, especially think about Genesis. The well is not just where you water your camels, it's where you meet your bride. We have these type scenes in Genesis where the dating pool is the well. And so you find your partner there. So there are these different passages that let us know they found ways to tap into natural resources. By the way, they had, if you've ever done archaeological visits in different parts of Israel, there are ancient mikvahs where you can see where they've kind of dug into the earth and created living water, or tapped into living water. So they found ways to access the water. It would not have been like how we do laundry now. They'd be very jealous, I have a feeling. I do think, though, when I was thinking about Shmini, it's always around Passover, and that feeling when you sit down at the beautiful Seder table, everything's just in its place, and invariably somebody knocks over or spills even a little bit of wine or grape juice, which, a lot of us use very light tablecloths. It's a springy holiday, and you just see, immediately it's stained. Like my daughter brought home this very cute matzah cover this year, and it says Orly 2026 matzah, and it's got these little matzah stamps all over it. We immediately dumped an entire cup of grape juice on it. And so it's white with this huge purple swirl, and she's like, oh, it looks tie-dyed. So like maybe there was a good interpretation of spilling something here. She's 4. She's very cute. Oh, we do a lot of tie-dye in my house. As you can see, we're colorful. We like to, yeah. Okay, take a look on the handout. I have different page numbers than you do, so I'm going to call it by the title of the section. And it was is where we are. Do you all see that? Okay, and it was on the 8th day. That's how our portion begins. That day was joy for God, like the day when heaven and earth were created. And it was morning and it was evening. Vayehi, this word. The Talmud invests the commonplace narrative formula Vayehi, and it was, with all the wonders of creation. This is the historic moment when, after 7 days of inauguration, the tabernacle is graced by the appearance of God's glory. This moment is compared in the Talmud to the appearance day by day over 7 days of the divine creation of the world. Those original 7 days included the Sabbath day of divine rest. In mystical thought, this was followed by an unrealized 8th day, transcending the boundaries of this world. This 8th day is, in a sense, enacted at this tabernacle moment of divine joy. Some deep desire of the divine has been realized. This day, the first day of Nisan, says Midrash Seder Olam, took 10 crowns of distinction. The day itself is somehow dazzlingly bright. So why would we have this moment of divine joy? What is it about this moment that's making God feel so happy? We could imagine why the people are happy, but why is God happy? They're doing what God has been saying to do all along. Okay, so there's an obedience piece that's happening. Why else would God be happy? Why so happy that it's dazzling? This isn't just like, oh, it's going so well. There's something special here. Can't stretch, you're catching my attention.
I know, well, I volunteer. These, I mean, you just initiated the priesthood, so is it like a creation completion type thing where like the whole thing's finally initiated?
Yeah, it's happening. They've gone through all these ceremonies and rituals. It's finally happening. I think there's another piece too. I think often when we talk about covenant, it feels a lot like we have the burden of how to act. We carry the mitzvot. We're supposed to act a certain way, and then God's going to make all of these promises come true. I think this is a moment where we could possibly read the character of God as deeply relational. Finally, God gets to be close to the people. They made the way for God to finally get to be present with them in this kind of deeper, more meaningful context. So perhaps that's perhaps for me, that's why there's this extreme joy for God. Yeah, Vivian.
So 8 has a special meaning too. I mean, if we're talking about the covenant, the Brit,
Aha.
Brit Milah, it's all 8.
Very good. Yes, 8 is a very important number. And I love that this is Shmini. That's the Torah portion. It happens to be that it's just because it's the word on the 8th day. But Shmini being the word here, 8 is a really important number for us. We get focused on 7 because of Shabbat, but 8's also a very important day. This teaching from Aviva Zornberg that perhaps this is this kind of mystical 8th day that was missing from the creation saga. It got a little sidetracked. It got postponed to this day. So it's a day of real joy. And it's a day that this kind of being that's been scary, you think about Sinai. God's scary at Sinai. The thunderstorm is very scary. It's overwhelming. Here, God's presence is going to draw near in a different, maybe safer, more controlled way.
Does the golden calf play a role here in that finally God can say, I forgive?
Yes. We're going to get to an Aviva Zornberg teaching about that momentarily, in fact, where it says a new song. But yes, exactly. Her whole teaching is that the book of Leviticus is the apology Torah, basically, for the golden calf and the way of making reparations with God. So yes, I think there is an easy interpretation there. Finally, we can just move on. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's take a look at starting at verse 15. I want to just highlight too, if you're following along in a bilingual text, you'll see the Hebrew, each of the verses in this next section, the first 1, 2, 3, 4. The first 4 verses are going to start with a verb that Aaron is doing. So I just want to draw your attention to how the verses are starting syntactically. Next, he brought forward the people's offering. He took the goat for the people's sin offering and slaughtered it, and presented it as a sin offering like the previous one. He brought forward the burnt offering and sacrificed it according to regulation. Then he brought forward the meal offering, and after taking a handful of it, he turned it into smoke on the altar, in addition to the burnt offering of the morning. He slaughtered the ox and the ram, the people's sacrifice of well-being. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, which he dashed against every side of the altar, and the fat parts of the ox and the ram, the broad tail, the covering fat, the kidneys, and the protuberances of the livers. They laid these fat parts over the breasts, and Aaron turned the fat parts into smoke on the altar, and elevated the breasts and the right thighs as an elevation offering before God, as Moses had commanded. Interesting here that Moses commanded it. I just want to draw your attention to that. But take a look at these verbs. Vayakrev, 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 vayishchat. So I was in a meeting yesterday with a few other rabbis from across the country, and one of them offered a Devar Torah and highlighted the repetition of these verbs, that each of these verses is starting with Aaron doing something on behalf of the people. This is the people's offering. And one of the things that my colleague said, Neil Hirsch, who's a rabbi in Cincinnati, he said that there's a tension between the roles of Aaron and Moses, and also just Aaron, and the rest of the people. And that happens in the power dynamic. There's a tension in the power balance. And we often think of the priests as mediating a relationship between the Israelites and God. You know, when you think about, like, what's the job of the priest is really the one who's doing the work so that the people can have this relationship with God. But what Neil Hirsch was saying is actually, we could read this a little bit differently. The people pick the animals. The people raise the animals. The people bring forward the animals that they choose. All the priests do is the last step. So the people are really the ones doing almost all of the work. And then the priest is the one who at the very end does the final step and kind of takes it across the finish line. And I think that reading to me really resonated, because I think that's almost a more empowered reading for the Israelites. They have a little bit more agency than I think we often give them. They have help facilitating their relationship with God, but actually they have a lot of work to do themselves. It's not the priest carrying the full load of the work. So I just bring that for our consideration, because it was a different framing than I had heard before. And so I wonder if anyone has any reactions. And David, before I did, I saw your hand was up. So it's okay if it's not related to what I just said.
I just wanted to make a quick comment in response to Paul's issue about the blood.
Okay.
Which is the altar is made out of acacia wood and bronze. And all the blood that's getting splashed is being splashed on wood and bronze, not on fat.
Well, there's a whole thing with the parochet later.
Clothing, that's another issue.
Yeah.
But in general, all this blood is not creating a lot of laundry.
Just for the priest. Yeah. Yeah, Doris.
Well, I don't think you want to undersell ritual,
No.
because you could say that a couple preparing for marriage do all the work. They date, they test each other out, they visit their parents, they have friends, gather together, celebrate. But the ritual that the priest officiates at is crucial.
It is.
And to say he's only doing this at the end, no, he's ritualizing something that has been going on for a while, and the ritual is key.
Well, I would never undersell ritual, because I love ritual and I feel like it's the best part of my role. But I think you're right to add this nuance, and I don't want to be misinterpreted. So just to say, the final step is a very, very critical step. And I think the priest's role is enormous. And when you think about what they're doing, they're making sure everything is following the rules so that God will draw near to them. But I just think in general, we've kind of, I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I shouldn't say we. I have kind of looked at the priests as the ones doing all of it. And I think the framing that I heard yesterday helped me realize just a different kind of understanding of that. So yes, I especially, I love to be under the chuppah, to be the one to make the marriage happen. It's the best. I love a ritual. Okay, so we've talked about divine joy. We've talked a little bit about these offerings. Let's talk about blessing. Look at verse 22. We'll pick up right there. Aaron's going to raise his hand. So Aaron lifted his hands toward the people and blessed them. And he stepped down after offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the offering of well-being. Moses and Aaron then went inside the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the presence of God appeared to all the people. Fire came forth from before God and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar, and the people saw and shouted and fell on their faces. Now, let's talk about and shouted. So in the Hebrew, it says, Vayar kol ha'am, vayaronu, vayiplu al panehem. So this word, vayaronu, is going to be important for us. Take a look where it says a new song. This is going to take us back to Steve's point here. It seems clear that the fire is identified with the revelation of glory. In consuming the sacrifices, the fire emerging from the Holy of Holies testifies to God's acceptance and favor, the grace of God's presence. The people's reaction is vayaronu. They sang in exultation. Never before or after this moment do we read of this quality of song in a narrative context. So powerful is their experience that it apparently prostrates them. It collapses on the ground. This moment mirrors the divine joy of which the Talmud speaks. In human experience, however, it has a cataclysmic quality. The people are overwhelmed. What is the nature of this song? In Kabbalistic and Midrashic traditions, it seems to represent a complex rather than a simple moment of joy. The Zohar remarks that from the time of the song at the Red Sea, there was no joy like this joy of the 8th day. Sfat Emet notes that the difference between the two songs, this one and the one at the Red Sea, is that in the miracle of the sea, the song is fully communicated in words, while on the 8th day, there is just the cryptic description. They sang or exulted. The first song at the sea, he writes, was created for all generations. This is the song, the foundational expression of wonder in the miraculous event. However, with the sin of the golden calf, song fell silent. Once the rupture had been healed, the people were capable again of singing the eternal song, but with the words obscured. In other words, the song of the 8th day is both less and more than the original song at the sea. The eternal song has been interrupted and is now restored with a difference. Now it comes without words. Now it includes, as Sfat Emet puts it, the knowledge of having been forgiven. The ecstasy at the appearance of the divine fire is overwhelming. It throws them on their faces at a loss for words, blocked or dumbstruck. For now they are ba'alei teshuvah, penitents in the world of hiddenness. They no longer belong in the expressive ranks of the righteous who have never been interrupted by sin. Theirs is an explosive song, uncontainable, mysterious even to themselves. What do you think? Steve, what do you think? Heavy sigh.
I put more weight on the miracle of God's presence than on the feeling, oh, I'm now forgiven. Those two are present, but I kind of put more weight on, wow, there's a divine presence in our midst.
Do you feel like they're actually distinct, though? Because the divine presence in their midst, in theory, is because they're forgiven.
If the golden calf had not happened, in a sort of contra-historical kind of thing, wouldn't they have done the sacrifices and God's presence would have been there to guide them through the wilderness?
In theory.
So, I don't know. It's just my reading of it that this is something that they have not been this close to the divine. Sinai was somewhat at a distance, and this, through
Okay. David, coming your way next.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to make of this and God's glory appeared? I mean, what does that mean?
What does that mean? That's one of the great mysteries. So God's glory can appear in lots of different ways. Here, it seems to be the fire. It seems to be, at least in my interpretation, that God's fire consuming the burnt offering and the fat that's on the altar seems to be the manifestation of God's glory in this context. What do you think it means?
I ask because I don't know. I mean, it says that God's glory appeared, and then the next sentence is, and fire came out. So those seem like separate events.
They do. Let me tell you who do I have here? Levine. He says, the Sifra interprets this as a fire from heaven. Rashba more accurately identifies it as the fire of God that was inside the tent, which we're going to talk about when we get to Nadav and Avihu in a second. Fire came forth from before the Lord. God's fire issued from the kavod, from God's glory, which itself was a fire that was enveloped in a thick cloud and pervaded the tent. It was a blessing to those who pleased God, but destructive to those who angered him. On this occasion, the ignition of the altar fire was cause for rejoicing. That's what Livian says, yeah.
I doubt any of you have been to a Holy Roller's funeral, but it reminds me of the group hysteria. And the focal point in one of these funerals is the casket in front of the congregation. And everybody literally goes physically crazy. They're overwhelmed by this fascinating thing in front of them. And that's what it brought to mind. I've been to one of those, and people get pretty excited.
Well, I think that's that like feeling of ecstasy, the feeling of ecstasy, right? That's how it's described here. It's like emotional overwhelm and
Yeah,
frenzy.
you get fixated on an arbitrary thing, which the pastor drums up, in this case it's the priest. And you get everybody's mindset on this thing, and it's a group hysteria.
Group hysteria, yeah. Hang on, there was a hand over here. Ellen, did you have your hand up a second ago?
I said the same thing I was gonna say.
Perfect, okay. Lou and then Paul.
Considering the sequence of things, they've crossed over the Sea of Reeds, they found water, manna, and Moses going up Sinai. So all this is like a tense situation. So this is the first time they have a chance to take a deep breath and sort of relax. That's what seems to me, and it's like they're and so this is like a stability, some kind of stability that they say, wow, we kind of finally made it, in a sense. We attained a certain level, we're doing our sacrifices, we have a way, we experienced the golden calf, we got, a lot of us got condemned and all that, so this is a way that we, things are now normalized, we can atone for our sins, we can, we communicate, God's in our midst, we have the Mishkan all set up.
Right.
And, I think this, this is a big deal. I think, and the significance of the 8th day is that even God could say, oh, wow, I did all, I created a week. Now the 8th day, I can look at what I've done and, I can be satisfied or, happy that,
Right.
I can, be self-satisfied.
I don't know that they're relaxed yet, but I do think that sense of satisfaction and wow, it's working would have really been good. I think this to me feels like it's so orderly and so carefully structured that it's almost like the way like an ER works. It's very high pressure, it's very high stakes, and we're going to see just how high those stakes are in a moment. But when it works, and here it's working. Paul, and then Steve. Okay.
I'm looking and I'm seeing that And then verse 24, and there came forth fire from the Lord. Previously, we heard about how the Lord showed God's self to people as smoke by day, fire by night.
Right.
So I'm asking myself, is this a nighttime occurrence? And also, is this a redundancy? Was the glory of the Lord fire? Or was it, I mean, obviously not the Lord's face,
Right.
but, or was it smoke and then fire?
So this is, in the next couple of verses, we're going to have the same sense of wrestling because it's not clear how many fires, basically, and what each fire symbolizes. And the commentators also don't agree. So we'll take a look at that in a second. But I think your question is it's the question that we're all asking, which is basically like, what is Kavod Adonai? What's it doing? And what does it look like? How do they know it's there? The fire feels like an obvious way to see it, but that fire may not be the glory of God. It could be an action by God. What is the glory of God and what's it feeling like for the people? We don't really know. Part of that I wonder is like how this section is written. This isn't really like one of our great narrative tales, even though this is a story of great closeness with God. So when you think about those other stories we were just thinking about, like Sinai and the Red Sea, those are these narrative stories, these really detailed, visceral stories of miracle and proximity to God. This is different. It's a priestly text. It's tighter. It's about the laws. It's about the priests are doing their job. And so we don't have the same kind of narrative context for it, like stylistically. So I think that changes also what we get out of the story. Leaves a lot more room for interpretation. And many more questions. Did you say something? Or Steve? I knew I saw a hand over here.
First about words.
Sure.
Hysteria versus ecstatic. Hysteria is loaded with misogyny.
It is.
So thank you, Sigmund Freud. Best in terms of how we visualize what this thing is, to use alternative words like ecstatic.
Yeah.
Secondly, shouting is also loaded because when Moses is told by Joshua, the people are shouting, and it's the sound of war, and they have this whole conversation back and forth, and it's in the presence of the golden calf.
It is.
These parallels are not happenstance.
No,
It's
they're
by
not.
chance. They're clearly, this is the approved way to have this ecstatic experience with the divine presence and not that golden calf stuff.
Right. This is a much more controlled environment. It is the sanctioned environment. And we will see in these next couple of verses what happens when it's not sanctioned. So look ahead with me. Go to chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. Now Aaron's sons, Nadav and Abihu, each took his fire pan, put fire on it, and laid incense on it. And they offered before God alien fire, which had not been enjoined upon them. And fire came forth from God and consumed them. Thus they died at the instance of God. Okay. They seem to be doing priestly jobs in the place where they're supposed to be. But it's a strange fire, which leaves a lot of mystery. What is this Eish Zara? So a little bit more from Zornberg here, where it says fire. Fire is everywhere and everywhere. The revelation of God's presence, was that expressed in the fire that consumed the sacrifices? Or, as some read, are these two distinct phenomena? Then there is the strange fire offered by Nadav and Abihu. In what lies its strangeness? Is this a technical problem with inappropriate fire? How does this become the crime that merits such dire punishment? And finally, there is the fire that consumes them. Is this the same fire that consumed the sacrifices? Does this fire now find a macabre second object of consumption? So look, we're asking all the right questions. Well done, everyone. Rashba offers a dramatic reading of this complicated narrative. The divine fire that consumes the sacrifices is indeed identical with that fiery appearance of God's glory that evokes such overwhelming joy in the people. Moreover, this fire is identical with the one that consumes Aaron's sons. Fire came forth from before God, from the Holy of Holies first to the golden altar, in order to burn the incense offering there. The fire found Aaron's 2 sons there near the golden altar, and it burned them to death. Then the fire went out to the tabernacle, to the copper altar, where it consumed the burnt offering and the fats on the altar. In a single economical gesture, one fire signifies acceptance and forgiveness on the one hand, and destruction on the other. The horrifying double object of the fire, animal sacrifices and human beings, is indicated in the syntax of the verse. As for the strange fire, Muhlbaum offers a further unusual reading. This fire would have been appropriate on any other day. It was private fire, esh min hediot, which means domestic or regular fire from their own ovens. On this specific day, however, Moses had not commanded the routine procedure, since he was praying precisely for divine fire. On this day, they should have waited for the miracle, so that God's name would be sanctified when everyone realized that fire had come down from heaven. The narrative of sin and punishment should then be read in the pluperfect. Aaron's sons had taken, and then they had died in God's presence. They could not wait for the miracle, and instead brought private fire to the altar. Muhlbaum's reading places the catastrophe before the appearance of divine glory, whereas most midrashic sources place it afterward, as an effect of overenthusiasm. However, as Meir Yitzhak Lakshin points out, the Sifra does seem to support Muhlbaum. When Aaron's sons saw that all the sacrifices had been offered, and all the deeds had been done, and Shekhinah had not yet come down, Nadav said to Avihu, "Does anyone cook a meal without fire?" Immediately they took strange fire. Pragmatically rushing in with domestic fire, they are interrupted in their priestly duties by the divine fire, which finds them in the wrong place at the wrong time. So again, it's not the typical interpretation we read about Nadav and Avihu. Often it's, they were so overzealous, they came and they brought this strange fire, and then they were punished for being overzealous. This is a different interpretation. Yeah, what do you think?
I recently listened to a podcast that put a whole new spin on this.
Okay.
And I've never heard it before, and I'll just bring
What was
it
it?
up
Yeah.
to everybody. And the podcaster's theory is that the Maccabees had a large hand in shaping the final version of the Torah, and many of the episodes are based in the experiences leading up to Hanukkah. And one of the issues prior to the Maccabean revolt was the influence of Greek culture, and the priests were starting to do Hellenic sacrifices in the temple, and the Maccabees revolted against that and killed the priests. And in this episode, the strange fire represents the Greek sacrifices that the priests were performing instead of the Israelite sacrifices. And when God killed them, that kind of reaffirms the Maccabees' theory or mission to get rid of the Hellenic culture and restore the original Israelite sacrifices.
That's a really interesting theory. What podcast was that?
It's called Biblical Proportions, and I don't know how sound this theory is that the Maccabees really shaped the Torah, but it really put the episode in a whole new light for me, and it really made more sense to me in that light than all of these other interpretations I've previously heard.
It's really interesting. So I'm not on one foot going to speak to the historical lens because I would need to do my own research, but it's a very thought-provoking theory. Really interesting. Yeah. Malcolm.
As I listen to this talk about fire, it evoked for me Notre Dame,
Uh-huh.
St. Theodosius, Anshe Chesed, whether there are any allusions that have been drawn to these fires or contemporary fires in holy places and its connection to these verses we're
I think it's hard to take a fire in a holy place and, at least with my theology, I won't speak for others, to say that that's a fire of God. Because I think here it looks so clearly like a punishment. And it's hard to, I don't know, maybe because I'm too close to one of those. It feels too hard to prescribe a certain meaning on it. I don't know. There are a lot of fires in holy places, though. Some literal and some not. Yeah. Interesting. Anybody swayed by this interpretation by Zornberg? Or Rashbaum, really, her interpretation of Rashbaum? Do we think it's one fire? Or do we think it's multiple acts of fire from God? Maybe a different way to ask it is, why would it matter if it's one or more than one? Like this, I like that she uses a single economical gesture. That phrase is very satisfying. The idea that like it's this ping pong of lightning that kind of goes back and forth and kind of knocks out all that it's supposed to do. Like, does it matter if it's just one? If it's the glory of God and that's what it is? Or does it matter if it's more than one act of fire? What do you think? Like, what does it matter? We're asking it, yeah.
The editors placed this story, and it's a very short story, immediately after. So one wonders why it's placed here. I know it's sometimes hard to know chronology based on the Torah, but this seems like it was too short versus plopped right here. There seems to be a lot of intentionality.
Yeah.
So it's hard not to contrast those that are approved kinds of summoning versus this, which pretty clearly from the words is not an approved kind of summoning. So it would seem to be separate fires. One which induced joy, and perhaps one could conclude that not Rabbi who said, hey, this is pretty good stuff. Let's see if we can summon God in the same way, a very sort of non-Jewish
Oh.
kind of thing. Let's see if we can
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? We'll try not to read into that timing. The library lights are still on, so it's just this room in the hallway. That's so weird. Okay, well, we're good. Is it still working? So it's just the lights? I'll text Jen while we keep talking just to let her know. Okay.
I just feel like there's a strong argument to say this is a counterpoint. There's ways to do it the right way, and just in case you didn't get this contrast with the golden calf, here we'll just put it right immediately afterwards.
So, Steve, are you open to these readings that put Nadav and Avihu before?
No.
Okay. Let there be light. David?
I want to point out Friedman's
Please.
view of this. He points out that in the time of Jeroboam, the first king of the northern kingdom, there were these priests whose names were Nadav. They were the sons of Jeroboam, Nadav and Abiah.
Okay.
And King Jeroboam erects golden calves at the sanctuaries at Dan and Bethel. And so one interpretation of the story, which is consistent with other things that I've read, is that this was an attack on the practices in the northern kingdom, just as the story of the golden calf was. So it's inserted here to say, okay, what they're doing in Jerusalem, that's the right way of doing it. What they're doing up there in the north, that's another.
I think especially when we see the names overlap like that, we have to pay attention. And either it's a cruel naming of his sons, or there's some other historical implication to the story setting. It would be not a very generous thing to name your kids that after this story. Although Nadav is not an uncommon name. As you know. Okay. There is a reaction to what happens. Let's pick up at verse 3. This is a very interesting interlude. I mean, this is a 7-verse story, this little blip. But this next piece is how Moses and Aaron kind of react to what happened. And there's a lot here that we think about in terms of family dynamics, and I think we read a lot into these. So verse 3, by the way, we've just ended with a fire came forth from God and consumed them, thus they died at the instance of the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what God meant by saying, through those near to me I show myself holy, and gain glory before all the people. And Aaron was silent. It doesn't say that Aaron punched him in the face, but I do feel like he would have been justified. So this is what God meant by saying, through those near to me I show myself holy, and gain glory before all the people. And Aaron was silent. What could that possibly mean? To those near to me, I show myself holy.
Showing yourself holy can be taken in 2 ways. One, it can
Okay.
be a
Keep talking.
welcoming situation. And also,
No, I was trying to isolate my impact.
Okay, but you know what would happen.
I didn't just get, I'm sorry.
No problem. Keep going.
showing yourself holy can be a good thing.
Right.
In other words, you're receiving the blessings of God.
Sure.
But at the same time, these weren't such positive things that happened in Nadav and Abihu.
Yeah.
And showing God's self as holy was saying, I did something that shows that I am holy and you obviously were not.
Or they obviously were not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were
Right.
not.
They were not. Yeah.
And
Yep.
you know, to me, this whole story, we talk about context and timing of the story.
Yeah.
It goes, I'm getting ahead only by a few verses. It talks about one of the next things God did was speak to Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I recall God ever speaking to Aaron in Exodus or Leviticus. And also, the first thing God says is, don't drink.
Yeah.
So was God upset that Nadav and Abihu were drunk?
So this is a great question. I think there's room to interpret it that way. That like somehow in the ecstasy and the hubbub of the moment, they were intoxicated. And so when Aaron goes in fact, it's going to say, so that you can distinguish pure from impure, you have to have your wits about you. You can't be drunk because you have a job to do. And the job of the priest is to understand the boundaries. So perhaps that's a corrective for their behavior, even though it doesn't say that explicitly that they were intoxicated, but we could probably interpret it that way. Yeah. Please.
I think I believe the phrase, those near to me, I show myself holy. I think that's an internal thought. That's an internal belief that if you believe in him and worship him, he's with you, his presence is within you. And we don't have the authority or privilege to bring God in our presence. It has to be within ourselves. We don't ask for God's presence putting this fire, because if he is saying he is within those that are near to him, or near to him.
Near to God.
Those near to me, I show myself holy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I wrote this a while ago, and my note said, people worship God is good, and don't call for him.
No, it's interesting that I think there's a tension also between like modern religiosity for Jews and what this ancient religion looked like, We have our roots in this religion, but we don't practice the same religion as our ancient ancestors because we're not offering sacrifices. The cult is different. The rites, the rituals are different, even if the roots are connected. So perhaps there is a tension there between like our modern interpretation here around, could it just be that God is within or whatever? I think another piece here is I wonder, why is Moses talking to Aaron? Why do we have this narrative piece of his response to Aaron? What does it serve? So is he trying to console Aaron? Is he trying to teach Aaron something? Is he trying to justify something because he feels implicit in what happened or complicit? Like, what is the reason that Moses is even talking right now? And why, in a section of Torah that has less dialogue between the characters, why here is Moses talking to Aaron at all? What's he trying to do? Because I think that changes our interpretation of his efficacy. If he's trying to console him, I don't think he's nailed it. I don't think we should be saying this to people. But if he's trying to teach him something, or he's trying to offer a corrective, perhaps that's, poorly timed, but maybe more effective. So I think our own lens on what it is he's trying to do by talking to Aaron, and then Aaron's response by Yidom Aharon, that Aaron is silent. It's a stark silence. No response. Not yelling, not crying, not pushing back, no engagement. Yeah.
I was wondering before you said that, and this I think connects, whether this could be interpreted as a corrective about the priest needing to follow instructions exceptionally precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would read it as a teaching, as some sort of like a ruler slap on the hand, which you wouldn't necessarily respond to. It's like, okay, so corrected. But then the rest of the passage then goes on to say, here are some more rules about what you're supposed to be doing.
Right. So I think we could definitely read it as a teaching, as a corrective. The question is just, does that show any compassion or empathy on Moses' part in this moment? Now we have to remember, this isn't some like family vacation they're on. They're in the middle of the most intensive day of sacrifice yet. They have just successfully, perhaps depending on the timing, they've just successfully offered these sacrifices and seen God's glory. So the stakes are higher than ever. It's not like they can just take an aside and kind of like go for a walk. Like they're in the middle of work. They're in the middle of the day. So I think, perhaps it's in real time, this is what we have to say, and we can have a more tender moment later. We'll see. Please, Doris.
Well, first of all, I see Moses coaching the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
The next line says Moses assigns somebody to get rid of the body.
Uh-huh.
Moses is really the MC of the whole day.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, Aaron's two sons are dead. And Moses nudges Aaron and says, you're the priest, I'm the prophet. You've got a job to do. You cannot stop. You have to go forward. And Aaron wants to scream. Aaron wants to attend his sons. And Moses says, no, no, no. Go forward. You are responsible for the holiness of the day. You have a job to do, different from my job, different from everybody else's. Carry on.
Well, and think about the time differential. If Aaron goes to his sons, he is disqualified.
That's right.
He has to go outside of the camp
That's right.
for several days. So to get him back into sacred service, they would be greatly delayed.
That's right.
And I think the idea of this like pep talk of like, get back in there, you got to keep going, that is a way to read this because there's still a lot of work to do. Yeah.
So, this is a rich conversation to try to react to, but I don't see this, I don't see the sort of right and wrong aspects
Okay.
of the interaction being very significant. I think this has more to do with subordination
Okay.
to God's power.
Mm-hmm.
And that when God says, through those near to me, I show myself holy, what he means is those who are connected what's the word I want to use? Sort of immersed in God's power.
Mm-hmm.
The two sons are not connected. Right? You can't be if you're drunk, for one thing.
Right.
But also, they're not living that way.
Right.
And what Moses is saying to Aaron is the same thing. Get out of the realm of the mortal human being. You're in the presence of God now. Stay in it.
Mm-hmm.
You have a job to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And he does. There's work to do. We're going to read it. There's work to do. They've got to clear up and reset to continue on. There will be a moment later in this chapter where Aaron is going to push back ever so slightly, and Moses is going to take it. There will be a moment, not in these verses, but in a couple verses later, where he's going to be like, what did you thought that was going to be okay? And Moses is like, you're right.
But look at the irony of the situation. The people are sacrificing these living things to appease God. God says, I'll show you what a real sacrifice is. I'm going to kill two of you.
Yeah, so that reading theologically is really tough. That's really tough.
But it's there.
You're not wrong, but that's a very tough reading. And I think that kind of reading makes the continued sacrifices to God have a very different cadence and tone. Because then it's a fear-based. Now, of course, we see often in Torah, we're supposed to fear God or to be in awe of God. It's not that this is a fearless relationship, but that being the tone of it moving forward is a very difficult dynamic, I think.
Yeah, but the implication is you can sacrifice all this to me. It's irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. Do it all day, do it all year. We dream this thing up to kill living things to satisfy me. It doesn't work.
I don't know if the God of Leviticus would say that.
Well, I never grasped the thought of God created all this stuff. Why would you want to kill it?
Yeah,
For whatever reason.
right. Right. No, I think that's a tension a lot of us feel with this. How do you have a creator God who's like, yes, the way to get close to me is destruction? That's a very tough tension in our religion. Yeah. Coming your way.
Perhaps a more simplistic way of thinking about it is the actual sacrifices themselves God doesn't care about. What God cares about is the very careful following of the rules and showing respect to the power that God represents. So it could have been not sacrifices, but something that required an enormous amount of effort and a giving up of something really important. And that just demonstrates, at least in the biblical mind, God is looking for those kinds of devotional kinds of things. I'm going to follow the rules exactly. I'm going to give up something really important, and then God will dwell among us.
Right. I think there's another piece here, Jimmy, related to what you were saying, which is we know what our neighbors were doing. We have archaeological evidence of other neighbors in the ancient Near East and around the world that were doing human sacrifice. We know that it was happening. The Akedah, the binding of Isaac, seems to be a polemic against human sacrifice. So to move from that to Leviticus, to read these two as sacrifices, to read Nadav and Avihu as sacrifices, is a really difficult tension. I think, Steve, to take a simpler approach is on one hand also easier for my brain and feelings. But I think because it's Leviticus, it does feel like this is a black and white situation. And that's why we so often, the default reading here is that they were overzealous and they were killed. Because that seems to be the most straightforward interpretation. Maybe it's not the right one, but it lends itself to that. Gina, did you ever
Yeah. You said overzealous. I see it like that too. And also that it's also in some form mentioned elsewhere. Leads me to believe somewhere in the ancient universe such a thing happened. 2 people got consumed by fire. And here we have 2 guys who want to be spectacular. They do something with the fire and they kill them. I mean, it just explodes and kills them. So then they put it in here so that it can have significance. But all it is a bunch of idiots using
Playing with fire. It's a bunch of people playing with fire. So, it's another piece of this to me is the tension between the great joy, and Zornberg speaks to this a little bit when she's talking about Rashbam, but this extreme joy and then the extreme terror of the 2 sons being killed. And when you think about what happens physically when we have high emotions of any kind, a lot of those feelings start to feel the same in the body. So high excitement can feel also like high anxiety. Big anger can also feel like big sad. Like those feelings that we have can sometimes transfer. Many of you know I am a crier, but I cry for all kinds of things. I cry for sad, I cry for happy, I cry for angry, I cry for anxious. There are things that set us off in different ways. They're not always that different when we embody them. So here we have this fire. By the way, what could be more dazzling? We talk about that divine joy teaching and how dazzling with joy this day was. What could be more dazzling than big fire? So it's up to us, I think, to interpret what's the feeling of that big fire. Is it a bunch of people playing with fire that shouldn't be? Is it the divine presence? Is it punishment? There's all of these different ways to understand it. And the fact is, it's going to be a mystery for us. Yeah, Ivan.
All this discussion about the importance of sacrifice and you got to make sure you do it right, it brought to my mind the prophets. And don't the prophets eventually, like Micah and Isaiah, say, God really doesn't care if you sacrifice or not?
Well, the exilic prophets had to say things like that.
Excuse me?
If you're in exile and you don't have your sacred spaces, you have to figure out a different way. So the exilic prophets are more likely to say things like, we don't need sacrifices because they can't do sacrifices.
But doesn't Isaiah say, God really doesn't care whether you do it, he just wants you to, feed the hungry?
Well, is this the fast I desire? We use that on Yom Kippur. Yeah. It's the deeds that we need, not the symbolic actions. Right.
So it seems a contrast that we're spending all this time talking about the sacrifices now.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get to the prophets say, God doesn't care about this.
Right.
Just treat people right and don't worry about sacrifices and doing it right. So it looks like there's been a development in thought as to what really is important.
Yeah.
And
Well, think about when you hold a Tanakh, you have to think about how many generations of people have their opinions held in that book. You've got Tanakhs in front of you. How many voices and thinkers and folks had a hand in making that? How many generations of people? What their experiences were, the wars that they fought in, the miracles that they tried to understand. You think about what all of that gets captured into what we read as if it's linear, which of course it's not. There is evolution in thinking. There's evolution even within books of Torah. There's evolution. By the time, Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, who is like you among the gods, to Deuteronomy saying, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, there's only one God. We've got this staunch monotheism in Deuteronomy, which we do not find elsewhere in Torah. We become, over the 5 books of Moses, a different kind of iteration of ourselves. And so, of course, by the time we get to prophets and later texts, They're reacting to their own lived experiences, their own realities. It's a very dynamic text despite being canonized and so ancient. There's so much change within it. And then you think about these kind of growths out of ancient Judaism that take all these different shapes and forms. There is evolution in thinking. The word sacrifice means different things. When we think about, like, what are the things required to draw near to God, perhaps the English word sacrifice doesn't even touch that now. Like, ours is not necessarily a religion where we're sacrificing things to get close to God.
So it almost seems like if the prophets were going to write the Torah from scratch
Mm-hmm.
and not worry about what was written before, they wouldn't even have Leviticus. They
Maybe
would
not.
just say, we don't care about this anymore.
Maybe not. I mean, I think the Deuteronomists also thought they were writing their own book. Yeah, they maybe would cut Leviticus altogether. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, Pop.
If I was a bystander to this event,
Mm.
and see that the Lord has his wrath
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't seem to be temperate at all, I would not be in respect of that Lord. I would be in fear
Yeah.
of that Lord. Why could he not have taken a step down and had a different punishment
Yeah.
rather than the ultimate?
When you think about the power, Nadav and Abihu are 4 of the ones who are second in command to Aaron. They are the next ones down. Aaron's high priest, they are right there next to him. So it's not just 2, Joe Schmoes of the Israelites. So I think, at the beginning of the chapter, it feels like it's a more controlled environment to be experiencing God's power. And it ends up immediately being just as scary as before. Right? It is just as scary as the God on Mount Sinai. Like, this is a very terrifying thing to watch. And then you think, we know what's going to happen after Leviticus. They're going to wander around for a while, worshiping this God that they can't see, that they're terrified of. No wonder they complain. I would complain too. All right, join me here, verse 4, chapter 10, verse 4. This is the cleanup crew. Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, theoretically also the uncle of Moses, and said to them, "Come forward and carry your kinsmen away from the front of the sanctuary to a place outside the camp." They came forward and carried them out of the camp by their tunics, as Moses had ordered. And Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Itamar, "Do not bare your heads and do not rend your clothes, lest you die and anger strike the whole community. But your kin, all the house of Israel, shall bewail the burning that God has wrought. And so do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, for God's anointing oil is upon you." And they did as Moses had bidden. So we get some mourning customs now. We're going to see the beginnings of some of our mourning traditions about haircuts and rending clothes. Interestingly, it's do not rend your clothes. So we have this dynamic here where everyone else, the whole house of Israel, is going to mourn. But Aaron and Eleazar and Itamar, the surviving sons, they're going to delay mourning, basically. They don't get to have the mourning rituals in real time because, as Dora said, they have a job to do. Michael, you said this too. They got to get back to work. So the stakes are very high. They can't go outside of the tent because they've been anointed. Remember, what precedes this Torah portion is the ordination of the priests. They have just gone through their own ritual to get ready for this one. They're anointed. They can't leave. They are restrained to the boundaries of the tent of meeting. They cannot go out, and they listen. They follow what Moses says. It doesn't say there's any interaction. It just says they did as he said. V'ya'asu kidvar Moshe. They followed his words. Okay. Mishnah Torah on mourning is going to cite this verse. So you have this on your handout. Which source teaches that a mourner is forbidden to have his hair cut? Leviticus 10:6 warns the sons of Aaron, do not let the hair of your heads grow untended. Implied is that every mourner is forbidden to cut his head. Instead, he lets his hair grow untended. Just as he is forbidden to cut off his hair, so too he is forbidden to trim his beard and any other hair on his body. This applies to cutting hair and having one's own hair cut. If he was in the midst of a haircut and he heard that his father died, he may complete the haircut. This applies to cutting hair and having one's own haircut. Similarly, it is forbidden to cut off one's mustache or to cut one's nails with a utensil. One may, however, bite off one's nails or trim them with one's other nails. This is chapter 5 of the Rules of Mourning. There were lots of them. But it's interesting to see this verse pop up here, that this is kind of the proof text for mourning practices around kind of disheveled hair and not cutting in a period of mourning. Okay, I'm bringing another one by Lou Greenberg. Those of you who've studied with me before have encountered at least part of this before. She wrote a piece called The Deepest Response of Love, Why Aaron Was Silent in the Wake of His Son's Death, and she's going to offer some reflections of her own period of grief. This is also excerpted, this isn't the whole thing, there's a link there if you want it. She says, what could have happened here with Aaron and his sons? We struggle to understand. Was this a punishment from God or a random accident? What crime could they have committed that was so heinous as to warrant death by flash fire? Perhaps they were acting out of the desire to serve and enthusiasm. Perhaps they were overcome simply by the pure joy of being in the presence of God and wished only to increase awe in the hearts of the people. And even if they were guilty of not following God's word to the last, did not their father Abraham in the storehouse of good deeds? Was there not some milder punishment that could have been meted out on the scale, such as that meted out to other miscreants in the Torah? Yet despite the fact that they performed everything else properly and created a glorious tabernacle celebration, despite their father's merit or their own, they are swiftly cut down. What was Aaron's response? 2 simple words, Vayidom Aharon. Aaron was silent. The word Vayidom means more than he kept quiet, Vayishtok. Aaron responded with a profound, shattering silence, a stunning silence, a shocked silence. He does not justify the cruel decree by blaming his sons and accepting their fate as punishment for their sins, yet neither does he revolt or protest God's action. Total silence. Aaron's response is the profoundest human and religious response to the reality that there are times when good people die unjustly or are consumed in tragedies that seem to be arbitrary, shocking, without justification, and with nothing to ameliorate the pain and loss of those who love them. A few years ago, in 2002, my beloved son JJ, age 36, was killed while riding a bicycle in Israel. He had arrived the night before to celebrate the holidays with the whole family and was bicycling with his brother to visit his sister in Zichron Yaakov when a young driver ran a yellow light with great speed and took JJ's life in an instant. JJ loved Israel, family, Judaism, athletics, God, nature, and life, and he was celebrating all of these loves when his life was snuffed out. When my husband and I sat Shiva, most people came with no forethought or agenda or explanation, though a few, out of good intention and compassion, tried to justify God or soften the loss by giving it some meaning. He was so good that God needed him by his side, was one such attempt, to which on one occasion, unable to hold back my words, I responded, but we on earth need him more. Most people understood at the deepest level there was nothing they could justify, nothing that could offset the pain or soften the blow, and they wisely remained silent. And we ourselves were silent, as there were no words we could speak that would make any sense of it. At times, devout members of religions that affirm an afterlife are tempted to say that the deceased is in a better place, living a better life in a better world, or they are tempted to suggest that there must be some sin or error or judgment that has brought this fate upon the victim. Such persons cannot tolerate the thought that what has happened is unjustified, for it violates their deepest principles about good and evil, reward and punishment. They need somehow to internally rationalize and justify a reality in order to bring the world back to a proper equilibrium. The Jewish laws of bereavement, so exquisitely tuned to the needs of the mourners, stipulate that the Shiva visitor should not speak until the mourner speaks. I'd always thought the point of that precept was to ensure that the conversation would flow to the place the mourner needs it to reach. But I now understand that the halakha enjoining the comforting visitor to hold back in silence serves a different function, to caution against offering a rationale for the decree of death. The deeper human religious response is to be silent, to live with the contradiction, and to affirm that we need not force meaning into tragedy. Sometimes the deepest response of love is to be silent. It's a thing that we know, I think, and yet we have a compulsion. when we are in the house. Yeah.
So, this happens to be the way I think about this, which is trying to find meaning in these things is in the human, in the level of human existence, not in the level of God consciousness. It's an inappropriate question when you're in the realm of God. Right? You're not supposed to figure that out.
It's not for you.
Right.
It's not your business.
That's right.
Right. It's God's
And
business.
so it's an act of subordination to give up asking those kinds of questions about meaning.
I know.
That, to me, that is the significance of this episode.
So how do you take that with what Moses said? How then can we interpret what Moses said?
You mean saying this is what the Lord meant?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what he meant, what he's saying. What Moses is saying is, you're in God's realm. Stop trying to find meaning.
You're not
It's
going to figure it out.
to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Any other reactions? Yeah, Jackie.
You know, in the Tanakh, an Aaron was silent. Inner grief. And when there's inner grief, there's silence.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the person cannot speak.
Absolutely.
When we talk about going into a home where somebody has died, and I'm going to expand on this, you have to consider where the person is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
In some Jewish homes, you walk in, you don't knock, you just walk in.
Mm-hmm.
You acknowledge the person, but you don't speak until they speak first. However, in some religions, you can say your loved one is in a better place because that's their belief,
Right.
and you have to reinforce that. So I think, you know, we read this, and there are so many arms you can put out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the Tanakh, and this is why the people are studying Torah forever, and each generation is interpreting it differently.
Yes.
So we can interpret it any way we choose. That is the right thing for us, for inside. But we have to think of the outside and where the other people are coming from as well.
Right. I think there are moments when we're particularly aware of our difference. And I think actually houses of mourning among different religions and cultures is a really interesting place to experience that because Jews do things a certain way. Now, not all Shiva homes are created equal. Many feel like a party when you walk in, and that sometimes suits the mourners really well. And so I think we let it be a mourner-driven experience. But I think there are certain things in kind of American death culture, when we think about across denominations and across religions, that feel really foreign to Jews, and we don't always expect it until we're on the receiving end of it. And so the little, I don't mean to I just said little, I don't mean to diminish them, but like the quips that we say to offer comfort are not always comforting. They might actually make us feel better because we feel like we came and we said a thing and we were so helpful because we came and we said a thing, when actually the thing is to show up. The thing is to be there, even perhaps in silence, but to be there. And I think that's the kind of piece that guides this. Yeah, Candy.
Do you have to be there for you, or do you have to be there for the mourner?
What do you think? That's an interesting question. Well, we read the Amen Effect together. What do you think?
I recently went to it wasn't a funeral, it was a celebration of life ceremony.
Okay.
A month after the person passed away, and it was Christian. And I have always been uncomfortable because I have not had a lot of experience in death or being in places where people have died of any religion. My mother thought it was protecting to not take me to my grandparents' funeral when I was 10 or something. And so I made myself go because I cared about the person very much, who the spouse of the person who passed away. And so I went, and I was really, really glad that I went afterwards. It was important for me to be there, and it was the way I felt
because I wanted her to know that I cared about it. And everybody was so kind, and they helped me know where to sit and what to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a whole lot out of it. The music was exquisite. You know, they sang Amazing Grace beautifully together as a congregation. And I got just lots out of it. And so I think that we go places for what we get out of them, not so much as for what we give. But I think it's important to show up. But it's important for us because we can learn things from that experience.
Yeah, I think any kind deed, we could say the same thing about people who love to volunteer. It helps them feel better, but it's also helping somebody else. Like, it's not always a bad thing to show up for a loved one because it makes you feel better. It's also going to make them feel better. I think that the guiding principle is basically, how am I showing up for them and with them? Am I only serving myself by showing up? Am I making it about me? Or am I there to support a loved one? And I think that framework is how we are generous with each other. It's not a bad thing if you left a memorial service and felt like, wow, I'm so glad I went to that. I got to show up for my friend. That's a good thing. Yeah, I think it's just about the framing. Doris?
First of all, I want to get back to something Steve said a while ago. The difference between ecstasy and hysteria. You might disagree with what I'm going to say, but people reacted to the fire with ecstasy. But I think the two sons were the ones who were hysterical. They went overboard. Think about it. You can disagree, but I love the distinction. Second thing is, in chapter 10, something really fabulous happens. The most important offering is the goat offering. And the last remaining sons of Aaron forgot to do it. The offering they made, but they didn't eat it. And in eating, the sins of the community were going to be abolished. But then Aaron says this. He says, yeah, they didn't do it, but so many things have befallen me today, namely the death of my two sons, we forgot. And Moses says, yeah, you're right. It's okay.
Doris, let's read these verses. Go to verse 8. Let's read this next section because I think it's really interesting to see it unfold. So God says to Aaron, it seems like we're right back to business.
Where are you?
Verse 8.
Okay.
God spoke to Aaron saying, drink no wine or other intoxicant, you or your sons, when you enter the tent of meeting, that you may not die. This is a law for all time throughout the ages, for you must distinguish between the sacred and the profane, and between the impure and the pure. And you must teach the Israelites all the laws which God has imparted to them through Moses. Moses spoke to Aaron and to his remaining sons, Eleazar and Itamar. Take the meal offering that is left over from God's offerings by fire and eat it, unleavened, beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in the sacred precinct, inasmuch as it is your due, and that all your sons from God's offerings by fire, so I have been commanded. But the breast of elevation offering and the thigh of gift offering you and your wife and your sons and daughters with you may eat in any pure place, for they have been assigned as a due to you and your sons from the Israelite sacrifices of well-being. Together with the fat of fire offering, they must present the thigh of gift offering and the breast of elevation offering, which are to be elevated as an elevation offering before God, and which are to be your due and that of your sons with you for all time, as God has commanded. Then Moses inquired about the goat of sin offering, and it had already been burned. He was angry with Eleazar and Itamar, Aaron's remaining sons, and said, why did you not eat the sin offering in the sacred area? For it is most holy, and it is what was given to you to remove the guilt of the community and to make expiation for them before God. Since its blood was not brought inside the sanctuary, you should have certainly have eaten it in the sanctuary as I commanded. And Aaron spoke to Moses. See, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before God, and such things have befallen me. Had I eaten sin offering today, would God have approved? And when Moses heard this, he approved. V'yitav be'enav, it was good in his eyes. So there's, of course, something didn't happen that was supposed to. It's been a crazy day. There's been a lot of terrible things happening. Of course, Aaron wasn't like, yeah, let's get the barbecue ready, bring it over here. We'll eat it in the sanctuary. There's so much going on. So Robert Alter has a couple of notes on these verses, which are on your handout. On the phrase, things of this sort befell me, he says, the obvious reference of this vague phrase is to the sudden deaths of Nadav and Abihu. Aaron cannot bring himself to report that painful event in explicit terms, so he uses this circumlocution. He uses this phrase to get around saying that his kids were killed by the same God they're making these sacrifices to. If anybody's going to have a weird feeling about sacrifices on this day, it's Aaron and his sons, his remaining sons. So it's still hard for him to say it. And by the way, this is how he breaks his silence. He's like, hello, they brought all these sin offerings. There's been a lot on. What was I supposed to do? Would God have even wanted me to eat it? Okay, look at the next line. Had I eaten an offense offering today, would it have seemed good in the eyes of the Lord? One common understanding of these words is that he is, after all, mourning for his son. So how could the Lord expect him to eat his fixed portion of the offering or to eat it all, with fasting being a practice of mourning? Jacob Milgram rejects this possibility because he notes that Aaron has been enjoined not to mourn. He proposes instead that the deaths of the two sons have contaminated the altar, transforming the offense offering into its archaic manifestation, in which its detergent function was too potent to allow for human consumption. That explanation seems unduly complicated, and it is entirely possible that Aaron has been forbidden to engage in any public gestures of mourning, disheveling one's hair, tearing one's garments, but is still permitted the mourner's act of abstention. Such a reading makes the exchange here between Aaron and Moses more personally poignant. The grieving father asks his own brother whether God could really expect him to constrain himself to ingest meat in this moment of his grief, and Moses concedes that Aaron is right. Viv.
This is not just meat.
It's not.
This is meat that was consumed by the same fire.
Correct.
That God's kids.
Ding, ding, ding. This is not a neutral offering. By the way, Rashbam would say it's literally the same fire. The same fire. Though if we follow his reading that it's all one fire, then this is the same fire. Of course he's not going to eat it. So I like Alter's dynamic here that he's like, if we see them as human beings, this moment is the bookend to the earlier moment where Moses says the thing about God appearing holy to people who are close to God and Aaron being silent. This is Aaron's gentle pushback of, are you kidding me? Of course I'm not eating it. And Moses being like, you know what? You're right. That, by the way, that little piece of repair is not insignificant because, again, they have more work to do. It's not like Moses and Aaron get to part ways right now. They're stuck in this. So that little moment of repair kind of allows what's next to happen. Okay, I'm watching the time. We're not going to read chapter 11, though you can on your own time. There is a piece here about eco-kashrut, which I think is very interesting. It comes out of the renewal movement. You can read that at your leisure. Turn to the last piece, inheritance. One of the things I love about the Torah, a women's commentary, is that for each Torah portion, they have poetry at the end of the chapter that connects thematically to the parsha. This is one that they included for this Torah portion. It's called Inheritance by Sue Hubbard. Childhood Sundays, the dread and the polished patina of oak with crimson claret, the snowy linen and initialed silver rings, and hexagrams of cutlery on table mats of hunting scenes, pink coats and foxhounds braying for the kill, and my father skillfully carving the strange lacunae, thin as slices of rare beef. Days when Grandma came, the air was sharp as English mustard. She wouldn't eat the meat, instead brought pots of pickled cucumber, chopped liver, balls of gefilte fish in waxy paper bags, which made my mother sigh. It's not kosher, Grandma said when I asked why. Unlocking clouded memories, 3 generations climb from East End tenement to this wooden Surrey hill. This was a house of teacups, of cupboards layered with mounds of my father's crisp starched shirts, of rose beds and clipped lawns where I learned to stitch on that elastic tennis club smile to cover the slow dawning that I was a Jew. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Good to be with you.
How's everything going?
About their responsibility. I mean,
So is it more like, well, when you're doing all this,
this is what is it?
they have it, versus like, well, when you, you're doing after you have it.
Yeah, I am. Or maybe it's just that I need something that rather than
Don't know yet.
His fault for giving us so much.
One person's gonna go.
Thanks, Mom.
Oh, okay. Do you know Malcolm? Okay. Want to grab it now?
Doris,
Yeah.
I was a little belligerent as a but it comes from the same root as hysterectomy.
Yes, I know.
he's always, he's never predictable. I think, always
Because you can't put him on a spectrum.
right, and he doesn't follow any sort of orthodox. But anyway, he used the term, Woody Allen, orgasmatron.
Okay, sure.
Which he makes the news as a way of, this is sort of, not before it, what was the word you could use? Yeah, exactly. But it's a bit like hysteria, but without the gender.
Okay.
Right? The idea was just sort of uncontrolled, like juvenile,
Okay.
you know, being a slave to your primary emotional reaction to something like that, which is
A tantrum.
Oh,
well, what's that?
yeah.
Anyway, the opposite of coolness is ambivalence.
Yes.
But there is some element of that in the ecstatic
Yes.
that you're talking about.
Yes. And certain allowances are made for behavior that otherwise would not be acceptable.
Yes.
When you are, that's why religion and ritual provide the framework. You're given a certain amount of grace to do things that would be totally unacceptable.
This is, by the way, where I think the black churches have been over everybody else. They've figured out the right boundaries to tap into that in a way that's totally acceptable.
Thanks, Art.